well, good. We'll just...
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming in today. Welcome to another episode of the Break the Rules live stream. I am your host, Lev Polyakov, all the way live with what BTR does best, which is these kind of crossovers that you're never going to have anywhere else on the internet. We've got Jack, the Perfume Nationalist here. We've got Nina Paley, genius animator. We got Chad Haag, the Chad Haag, all the way from India. And we are going to be talking today about Snow White. We're going to be talking a bit about Barbie as well. I know, Nina, you haven't had time to see the movie yet. But
I've read tons of reviews and synopses and online clips and things like that. I just haven't seen the whole thing.
So we're definitely going to get into it. But first, let's start with Snow White and the new up-and-coming actress who was bad-mouthing the original Snow White, and whether this is a sign that the old fairy tale paradigms of helpless princess being rescued by the prince, whether this is going away, fully. We're not going to have this anymore to even like a small extent, and now it's going to be completely equal. Men, women, I guess everybody's going to be like one of those American RPG characters. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen recent American or Western RPGs. It's very different from like Japanese or Korean RPGs, where they do start to make women look very, not attractive. So I think that there may be something going in that direction as far as like this male-female equality, but we're going to get
Wait. The American ones make females less attractive?
Yes. Jack,
okay.
What do you think? Do you agree or disagree?
With the video game characters?
Yeah.
Only America is punished with the woke gender thing of people being unable to understand what fantasy is or who the target audience for a video game is. This is just the result of all those years of like Gamergate shit of like women getting into the industry. And what was their accomplishment in the industry? It was to make the female characters uglier and make the breasts smaller, and presumably to hold a bunch of useless meetings about things. But that's all they do. It's stupid. I mean, I hope I don't care about video games, but I hope that eventually American video game developers could recover some freedom, and these ideologues could lose interest in that industry. But I don't know. Maybe it's just they make all the women look like Shrek.
Well, I mean, it is kind of a tangent because
you have some examples.
That's not like any kind of like misogynist exaggeration.
Can you do some screen share? Because I'm not.
They
in
just
this culture,
like you look side by side and it'll show like a female character who's like, okay, this is the like auburn braid hair fantasy lady, and then it goes past some sort of female executive where she says, no, the bridge of the nose needs to be wider. She needs to be fatter.
I just want to see it. I believe you, but
I'm not good at like multidexterously pulling up images of video games.
I'm going to look some things up. I'm going to be your Jamie here, but again, this is more of a side tangent. I would not say that our actress for Snow White, Rachel Zegler, is like some hulking Shrek creature by any means.
She's very pretty. She's very cute.
She's cute. But
she has like very pretty cartoon face.
She's cute. Disney's not going to cast an ugly Disney doesn't allow ugly people in their things, regardless of the.
But the only question here, but the only question here is whether this is the trajectory that we are heading towards, of more and more of this, kind of hatred of anything romantic, hatred of anything having to do with like the prince rescuing the princess. I don't know, Nina. The film's not out yet, but we've had Miss Zelger say what it's going to be like. What say you about the situation?
It's freaking Disney. I mean, they're an awful company. They make terrible decisions. I'm just like, I can't take. When I knew that they were making this movie, I was just like, yeah, another one, right? Like, first of all, you shouldn't make a live action version of every cartoon, particularly that cartoon, but they do, because all they do is recycle stuff. I mean, my relationship with the movie industry, the mainstream movie industry, is just like they churn out just a lot of garbage, and Disney especially. And us even talking about this just makes it worse, because like I didn't pay any attention. Like I sort of vaguely heard that they were making this movie, and I was just like, you know, again, like no surprise. And now it's like, oh, we're talking about it. So I, you know, watched the video clips you sent, and I read the article, and it's like, now I have more space in my brain devoted to this stupid Disney picture, which was free of it before. I mean, I feel like Disney, just like the Oscars, it's like we're only encouraging them by paying attention. They just keep doing it.
Well,
so
how much of it, by the way, do you think is part of the strategy of using that whole reactive anger economy to boost, or is that just a accident?
Oh gosh, that is a good question.
I would believe that the people, all the executives and stuff at Disney genuinely believe the woke ideology, but the end result is these endless publicity cycles where people are outraged that something from their childhood is being altered or raped with woke ideology in some way. And it's been going on so long that, like, when word got out that there was a Snow White one, I just felt nothing. Because obviously they would do it for Snow White, because Snow White is a symbol of whiteness as the ultimate standard of beauty and like female purity. So, you know, it just like I just feel maybe in like 2015, 2016, I felt that like rage at them doing these live action reboots, but they just like come and go. Like I just don't even pay any attention to what Disney currently does. I'm a big fan of like basically pre 1992 Disney stuff, and I actually think that Disney Plus is a very cool streaming service because of its intense interest in its own archives and preserving history. Even with all these like woke disclaimer things and trigger warnings, there's no other streaming network like that that's quite so invested in its own obscure history, like 50s live action movies about squirrels and stuff. But this is just, yeah, I mean, this is like the Little Mermaid thing over and over again. But when the movie actually came out, who cared? Like no one, the movie just kind of disappears. It makes a certain amount of money based on brand recognition automatically. I just think it's a really like cynical moment in movie making where Hollywood tries to figure out, you know, how they can keep the coffers full, and it's just by reproducing its classics with some kind of controversy.
Yeah, and also with this controversy, I was thinking like, well, you can always see the original, right? Like they're not literally raping the original because the original is still there and you can see it. And they own it. So if they drive people crazy with a crummy remake, people are going to be like, "Oh, I like the original so much more." And then they're going to watch the original, which they also profit from.
Hold on a second, though. Let's keep in mind that we are of a generation that is like, I don't know how old everybody here is, but we are not part of the generation like, well, even like Ms. Zegler, for instance, where she says that this movie, the original Snow White, you know, that was set in the 30s. Like, this is, you know, showcasing all kinds of, like, stalking and all kinds of female oppression, things like that. So the fact that things are out there, I mean, you know, the Iliad and the Odyssey and, you know, all the greatest works of philosophy are out there. That doesn't mean that people are going to read it. So if Disney puts all this stuff into their portal, I'm not really sure what the next generation is going to be into. Whether they're going to look up, I don't know, Song of the South. Is Song of the South there? I don't have a membership.
They haven't.
No.
The last time they released Song of the South theatrically was 1986, which was actually pretty recent. But it's the only one that has not been officially released on video anywhere but in Japan. And you can get it. Like they sell really good quality bootlegs of it in like Savannah, Georgia, and where they have like Uncle Remus, Joel Chandler Harris interest. And Song of the South is an interesting case because their own censorship of it has made it seem like something that it's not, where it's actually this very like sweet, kind of like innocuous, good-natured movie where Uncle Remus is the protagonist,
and he's
like,
not a slave, by the way.
He's not a slave. They give you this erroneous idea that he's like a slave just because it takes place in the antebellum South.
Well, I guess it's a similar thing to like Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben and things of that nature, where there is a certain stereotype of this, nice black person who is, very doting, and that's kind of an image that they also associate with the slave days. So I could see how they could see a connection there, but at the same time, I could also see how that is also part of the South. But that is, again, kind of like a tangent here. The more important thing to this discussion is that, forget Song of the South, but even like the classic Snow White or any of the pre-2000s Disney animated movies, is there going to be as much interest if so much of it is just going to be all this noise that's going to be advertised and pumped into the heads of kids that are going to be watching TikTok and stuff? Like, I don't know. I'm starting to think that even movies in general is not really going to be the future anymore if the attention span of a lot of kids gets really low. But then as far as what ends up replacing it, like, I don't want to focus too much on the technology here for now, but I want to go back to the feminism aspect. Because, Nina, you are a feminist. You are a TERF. And
what does feminist mean?
That's a good question. Well, you want, from what I understand, women to be given the opportunity to be equal to men in any capacity, which I do agree with. But the question...
We can't be equal to men in any capacity.
Well, more of like, if there is a woman who really wants to be a plumber, let's say, then nothing should stand in her way of being a plumber or being an executive or be yada, yada, yada. You get the idea. Like, to me,
there are some things it's like, that's what gender ideology has really made clear over the last decade, is that there are, in fact, some differences between men and women that you can't get rid of. So, yeah, there's a lot of things. Women are very capable and should have opportunities, but, men have more upper body strength. That's just a fact, like a lot more upper body strength. And they're probably some women that can do jobs that require a whole lot of upper body strength, but there's a lot of really dirt average men that can do those. So you're just going to see a lot more men in those jobs, and it's not because of sexism, it's because of sex.
I love these comments, by the way. We have a Galaxy Brain Vangus who says, pipe fitter queens. Oh, and your friend Karina, the wonderful Karina Cohn, who says, women long to work in the mines, part of Heterodorks podcast, which I recommend checking out.
No, it's men. Men long for the mines, right? Women, we were just talking about this because we did a podcast.
Well, a mine
earlier.
is kind of like a giant vagina in a way. Like, you go into the mine and you extract the jewels.
There you go. Right. Men long for, but I think it's Anna Slatz who likes to say that, because there's a lot of men who I generally respect, but when you do start talking about these inherent differences between men and women, there's this idea, which is true in many ways, that many women really want to have children. Many women really do. Not all of us, but many do. Many would be happier having children. So what you get from that is men who are like, women just want to have children, and if they're not having children, they're just making themselves miserable. And that really may be true for some or even many women. But then there's some women that don't, and we're incredibly glad and will fight to the death for the freedom to not have to be baby makers.
Yeah, but here's the ultimate question, though, and I want to get this from Nina and then from everybody, including the great Chad Hay, who has not spoken at all.
Poor Chad.
And I'm afraid, like, his internet's going to go down the moment that I call on him in India, so let's keep our fingers crossed that doesn't happen. But anyway, the question is this. As far as having the freedom that women have today, and I think that's great, that's beautiful, what ends up happening when you have Disney and other corporations that start advertising and start convincing girls, young women, that they have to go into this very particular direction of rejecting romance, of rejecting, having a husband, trying to find like their knight in shining armor, not being like this damsel in distress archetype in order to get to the man. Like when you, and I know it's like a couple of different things in there that don't always go together, but the point is that when you have forces that start influencing young girls and women, then how much would you say the choice that they're making is their own, as opposed to just being programmed to make these choices, and how do you fight against that? So Nina, you go first, but then I want to hear from Jack and Chad.
All right. I grew up in the enlightened 70s where second wave feminism was ascendant, and I had many second wave feminist ideas, including you do not need a man. You are not helpless. Helplessness in women is a bit disgraceful. And I remember coming of age in all of this and my hormones going haywire and desiring men. And I was deeply ashamed of it. Deeply. Somehow other women were cool with these natural desires, but I was very ill at ease with it. And I would even have, now remember, I was mentally a mess, right? I had like big depressive episodes, and also gender dysphoria. I probably would be transed if I had been a teenager today. But it did not at all make me not interested in men or not interested in romance. It might have made me a little bit more neurotic about it. But then I don't think anything stops these primal drives that human animals have. Like I've seen other, like I've also never wanted kids, right? And that non-desire to have kids was supported by my environmental ideas. I met a lot of environmentalists who intellectually and ideologically did not want to have kids or thought having kids was bad, but they reached a certain age and they had kids anyway. And then they found ways to rationalize doing that. So I think there are primal drives that nothing can stop and nothing will stop. Like I also, like when I was dating a guy that had kids, his 13-year-old daughter thought she was queer. She thought she was a lesbian because being a lesbian was cool and she identifies that. And she was like a closeted heterosexual. And yeah, you can be closeted for a couple years, but that is a really strong drive and it's going to come out eventually. And now she's married to a man, not very surprising. So I don't think crummy or ideological Disney movies are going to change anyone's basic primal behaviors. I think that they are going to be annoying to many people. They might be appealing to some people. This might actually be a good movie. You know, we don't know. I don't know.
It was written by Greta Gerwig, the director of Barbie, which we're going to be talking about. So yeah, who knows exactly what the movie's going to be like, but more as far as that kind of influence goes. Aren't we seeing, unless I'm mistaken, relationships going kind of down the drain today? Maybe you could say it's because of the economy or other factors, but
social media, pornography,
social media, exactly. I mean, things have changed. So as far as this whole let's say I don't know, brainwashing is the right term here, but as far as what these movies have as their message, how much would you guys attribute, like Jack and Chad, how much would you guys attribute that to changing anything? Or do you agree with Nina that these things have no power over young women? Ultimately?
I didn't say none, but, but they don't have that power, much. They don't have power. Total. Like I say, they can make you more neurotic about who you are. But then so can the alternative, right? Like if depending on who you are, like any sort of model, which is what this media is, any sort of model that is like handed to you and you're like, you should be like this. Like no matter who you are, there's going to be people that don't fit that and it's going to just make them neurotic. But that's just a problem with media in general.
Well, we're living in the world seeing the results of decades and decades of that kind of messaging, like this, sort of feminist criticisms and revisions of fairy tales and myths and stuff is absolutely nothing new. Frozen was the biggest movie in the entire world. That was from what, 2009? That's really old now. And the whole point of Frozen was to go through and correct all of the misogynist stereotypes of Disney fairy tales. So you have the girl being kind of harsh and like farting and rescuing the guy, and the guy being like useless and just by the way, it's not it's never, the aim is never equality. The aim is at the expense of men. So you have to make men, there's always you know, a give or take here. What they do is explicitly to make male characters weak and make men less complex and take away agency from male characters. So it's never just about empowering girls. And by the way, girls, there's no limit to the empowering messaging which girls are receiving from media. Like, the idea that there's any kind of lack of self-esteem or anything that needs to be done that has yet to be done to convince girls that they can do whatever they want is absurd. And it's part of this lopsided, inaccurate, dated view of culture now, where objectively men are way down here. Men have terrible jobs. Men get paid less. You don't get hired if you're a man. The entire structure of culture is about mocking you, actively demonizing you as a terrorist for your own sexual urges. You know, decades and decades of this. And this, we still have these discussions of, oh, but what about the self-esteem of girls? Guess what? The entire school system is about the self-esteem of girls and building up girls. Like, there's, but the sort of like fractured fairy tale thing of like, but what if fairy tales were feminine? Like, that was a big academic trend in like the 80s, you know. It's still going strong.
After Nina,
I just want to ask, so I don't think the prince in the original Snow White was a complex character.
Yeah.
So I just want to comment on your complexity of these male characters.
I'm not talking, that wasn't in
shallow.
reference just to fairy tales. That was in reference to all media where male characters in movies now, if they exist at all, there really aren't any anymore in anything. It's all movies are about teenage girls being depressed. All new movies, all of them, all horror movies are about
still action movies.
No, literally, I mean barely. But barely. There's that. But you know, the male character, if he is to be any kind of like romantic lead, or if the girl is romantically interested in him at all, he has one role to play, and that is to uncritically support her on the girl boss journey of her choosing. So that's the only way. It's this kind of Hays Code censorship thing of men. That's the only way men can be good in movies now, is to support her on her journey, whatever that may be, because every avenue is open to her and she can't be criticized for any of them, but he will support her.
Chad, now it's time for you to finally be unleashed upon the world. You have been held in the prison for too long. So, what do you got to say?
If we're talking about the kind of image that the media, or specifically Disney, is promoting for women for how they should want to envision themselves as explicitly being a revision of fairy tales, on grounds that, as Rachel Zegler said herself in that infamous video clip, it's the year 2023. It's not 1938 or whatever. Her criticism of Snow White is precisely that it's from the 1930s, and a lot has changed since then. Really, I think Zegler is just a more intelligent version of Anita Sarkeesian. It's quite fitting that she was mentioned, Sarkeesian, on Gamergate, just within the first few minutes of this live stream, because what Zegler can't say in quite the same terms as Anita Sarkeesian had done, which is just the idea that what has changed from the 1930s to the 2020s is technological in nature. Sarkeesian's critique of video games was really that we should not have the same mythological archetypes from the ancient world, like the damsel in distress. You can find that in Andromeda being saved by Perseus and countless other stories dating back thousands of years. We should not have those mythological archetypes on a system that is as sophisticated as, say, the Xbox 360. And a lot has changed since then, by the way. What is it, the PS5 now? How many PS iterations are we on
It's
now?
only getting
I actually don't know.
uglier. by the generation. But yeah.
Right, but on a purely technological level, these machines are far too sophisticated to still be trafficking in mythological archetypes from thousands of years ago, says Anita Sarkeesian. And specifically, the damsel in distress is offensive to her because what appears to be a subject is really an object. So the agency within a game like Mario is exclusively held by male characters. You have the protagonist Mario, and you have the villain Bowser, and they're fighting over Peach in the same way that football players fight over a football, right? You have a competition over who's going to possess the football in much the same way that you have a contest within that game over who's going to be able to get Peach. And Sarkeesian argued that the what appears to be the timeless nature of these archetypes is actually just our own laziness in disguise. So somebody like Julius Evola would argue that you have these archetypes universally. You have the Cinderella story, for example, not just within every Western tradition of folklore, but even within, there's a Chinese version. And one folklorist actually claimed you could trace it all the way back to ancient Mesopotamia, where our earliest written language, of course, is Sumerian. So really, as far back as records go, you can find this. And some, like Julius Evola, would say that's because it's actually disclosing something that is really real, not just on a physical, but a metaphysical level. It's disclosing something of a spiritual absolute. A great example of this, according to Evola, is the story of King Arthur. King Arthur draws the sword that nobody else can pull, kind of like Ram in Indian mythology, is able to lift the bow that nobody else can, not because he's physically stronger than anyone. That's how we would misinterpret that today, but rather because on a spiritual level, he is fit to rule the nation in a non-democratic, avowedly non-democratic society in which not everyone is fit to rule. Somebody on a metaphysical level as king is fit for that position. And this is something which is manifested to you through the mythological archetype of Arthur being able to pull the sword no one else can. This also has equivalents in Greek, Persian mythology because it's universal. Well, Anita Sarkeesian says that it's not that this actually tells us anything metaphysical. It's rather that we fall back on familiar stories as an excuse for our own laziness. We're so familiar with how the damsel in distress story is going to flow that we have a tendency to prefer stories we're already familiar with enough that we don't have to do that much work in interpreting them. And this is something which Sarkeesian, in her master's thesis at York University, argued we have to push the limits, was her own phrase, to challenge ourselves to envision different mythological archetypes with the realization that the technological progress which has occurred at the level of machines can be met with social progress in the form of having those video games systems disclose more up-to-date trends. And Zegler's really just a less intelligent version of Sarkeesian. She's arguing the same thing. The problem with Snow White is that the film in the 30s could still rely on the damsel in distress. It could still disclose something like love, whereas now it's just a stalker, right? That's her quote. The prince is just a creepy stalker, and the dwarves are no longer dwarves. They're just 7 homeless drug addicts of different racial and gender backgrounds. And that's exactly the point at which you no longer have Snow White. The story itself has disappeared, because we have done away with all of the archetypes that made it Snow White. Now it's, for Disney, just another item on a laundry list of franchises they can remake because they themselves are too lazy to think of, they're incapable, I should say, of thinking of anything new, precisely because, from a Kaczynskian and Illulian perspective, they're so deep in modern technology that technology's prohibition against human thought has made it impossible for the same people who are quite literally professional thinkers to do any thinking. And the idiocy, quite frankly, of Zegler saying, I starred in a film that I hate myself, is leading the headlines today to be that this film might even be canceled before its release, because Zegler just told her yourself that it's a story that is not worth thinking about.
Damn. All right, Niners, you had your hands up. What say you about this?
I did not think this would be germane to the discussion, but I am thinking about Sita Sings the Blues, a film I made based on the Ramayana. And how can I say it? When I started Sita Sings the Blues, when I first read the Ramayana, I thought Sita's a doormat. And, I should do some little version of this where she, revolts or whatever, where she like overthrows her oppression, something like that, stops being a doormat. But then my husband dumped me by email while I was on a trip to New York. He was still in India. And I was heartbroken and would have happily, done sati myself. Well, not happily, but I was in enough anguish that I thought about it.
For those who don't know, that means when the widows jump in the fire and
right.
Die
I was
in order to be with their
suicidal.
man. Yeah.
Right. And just like I said before, when I was growing up, that I did not think I was supposed to have these attractions to men or attachments to men, that I was neurotic about them. I was utterly confused by my devastation. I was like, I am today's modern female woman. Why do I feel like dying? Why do I want to die? Because my husband doesn't love me anymore. And, I had my ideas about life, and then I had my actual experience of it. And that really changed my interpretation of the Ramayana. And when I did a version of it, I was true to the story. I put my own, mind in it, of course, and I acknowledged my Americanness and all these other things, but I understood Sita in a really different and I think much more profound way. And I thought, like, these are not a lot of women in India complain about the Ramayana because they're like, this is like a demand for us to behave like this, and it's like a prescription. And for conservative people, it is a prescription. But for me, it's like, no, it's not that. These are archetypes. These are like human archetypes that we all have, and it's universal, and it transcends culture and time. And I'm finding in it a reflection of my own self, which I never expected. And I don't have to like it. I don't have to go like, this is how I should be. But it's like, well, this is how I am. And it was like a transformative experience for me to make that movie. And these myths are very powerful, and they stick around for a long time for a reason. And again, they're not to be prescriptive. I think interpreting them as a prescription is a terrible idea, but I think there's always something we can find about ourselves in them. There is like some kind of strange accumulated wisdom in them, not prescriptive, but informative somehow.
Well, before I get to Jack, that may be something that's easy for somebody like yourself who's an intelligent person to see. For other people, though, I doubt that they're going to be picking and choosing which aspects of a mythology they want to embrace. It just seems more like people watch something and then they just start subconsciously acting like this thing that they were. I mean, both nature and nurture, obviously, but when it comes to something like the mythology of Sita or any other kind of mythology, I would think that if, for example, we had some massive TikTok China-style campaign in order to encourage, I don't know, certain ways of being, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here, would that have somewhat of an effect on Gen Z as far as the way that they act with each other? Like, how much does this technology, because Chad, you were saying that these Disney creators are absolutely helpless when it comes to technology, but what if there were some people who were smart enough to figure out a way to use this weapon for good, to actually, I wouldn't say maybe inspire people, but get people to act in such a way that they don't end up making dumb mistakes, especially for the people who are not as intelligent, who are not going to be able to be very careful about how they interpret a certain mythology. But
that's what they're trying to do. They believe that they're doing that.
Well, I don't know, I'm kind of curious about this, because according to Chad, they don't even have that much willpower in that. But before I get to Chad, because that is an interesting thought, Jack, what say you about the power of technology to influence people perhaps for the better if the right people get the reins, so to speak, of these mechanisms?
Um, I mean, regarding like gender roles in myths and whatnot, I think the biggest cost or the biggest victims in all of this are boys, just because they have no role model. They aren't represented at all in current media. Everything is either explicitly for girls or unisex. If you go down like the former boys toy aisle in a Walmart or something, the GI Joes are all like black women. I'm not joking. I'm not like a conservatard making that up. It's they're forced to triangulate any identification through a female authority figure, and they already do that. Your entire life as a boy, you are women are in control of your destiny. You go, in the school system, it's all women. It's a matriarchy. Your mother controls you. Your manager likely is a woman. Like there's no identification, and we see this now that younger men feel this compulsion to masquerade as women just to feel politically valuable or seen. But regarding the technology and regarding Snow White specifically, this is a weird minor woke controversy to me, because the more like mythically offensive thing about Snow White and princesses in general is that they're about the innate value of physical beauty, and how physical beauty is a reflection of a pure soul underneath, which is something that you'll find to be really true with your own eyes. Like not that everyone beautiful is automatically a good person, but the kind of movie stereotypes of like Barbies and jocks are like bad bullies, and ugly seething nerds are the good people inwardly. That's not true. Beautiful people are kind.
Well, I mean, I
but
guess
they're
it
not
kind
going for that. They get this girl, whoever
Yeah.
this girl is, I don't know, to say something for media attention, and she's like a dumb, piece of shit who just says whatever she, stupid things she absorbed on the iPad in her shitty school system, which is probably something like is from the 30s, and like a man like has to rescue her, and like I don't know, like I don't want to be in this movie, like I hate this movie, I shit on this movie. And like that's a current thing of actresses shitting on the movie that they're in, and that's been a thing since Me Too, of actresses going through and like shitting on their body of work so no one can enjoy it. So they say that they were like raped or made to do a nude scene or something. It's really unfortunate, and it's Hollywood eating itself. So yeah, I don't know. I hope I answered one of your questions there.
No, absolutely. And when it does come to how much of these decisions that they make is just like this being an empty vessel, getting information from another empty vessel that got
like
it from
that
another
girl
empty
doesn't
vessel.
know. That girl doesn't
Yeah.
know what Disney is. That girl doesn't know. She's just some girl they picked out of a lineup because of how she looked. I don't, she's not the center of this. The journalists, the 30-year-old journalist will goad you into saying something like, what do you think of Snow White being from the 30s and being about a white person who gets rescued by a man? Like that's the journalist goads the dumb fucking girl into saying that. It's not the girl making up her own publicity tour. Like actors are stupid and they shouldn't be allowed to speak for themselves. And if the better the actor, the dumber they are. So
they
it's
should be
not the
like
girl's
Hannibal
fault.
Lecter. They should just like be wheeled in and just like
Yeah.
have like an
So you get the predatory journalist gets you, their job is to get that soundbite of you saying something related to a current woke controversy, which can be regurgitated on Twitter.
When you were saying this was going to be about damsel in distress, I thought at first you were talking about the actress, because I saw that clip of her, and she's having to go through this not a cancellation experience, but people saying like really mean things about her. She's like 22, totally unprepared for this.
She doesn't know what
she doesn't. Yeah, she really doesn't. And you know, like she has to deal with people not liking her, which has got to be devastating. And they're saying really mean things about her. Like this guy said, this is the most unlikable actress I've ever seen. So I was expecting something awful, and then I watched her clip, and I was like, oh, she's cute. You know, she's
her
pretty,
and her and her voice all this time is saying, "Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do." You know, like it is kind of like being this vessel that can be inspired by something like religion, for example. If someone like her was to give their life to something like that, I could see why religion is so powerful for a lot of people. And that used to be the my friend Neil, Gnostic informant, always says that Christianity was like the original woke culture in comparison to what was the Roman Empire paganism before that. So I don't know, Chad, if you would agree with that statement, like how the original social justice warriors were Christians. But in order to thread this into what we're talking about right now, which I'm going to strangely attempt to do, when it does come to technology and the, oh man, here I go talking about, again, the Age of Aquarius. This techno, Nina's laughing already, this techno future that we're living in right now, Meme Analysis, who's coming in next week, a very interesting YouTuber, I'm sure a lot of you guys know him, he talked about how in the Age of Aquarius there's going to be two different paths for people to go into. The one path is going to be going within and discovering, thanks to, you know, the knowledge that we can access today, certain things about ourselves that we would have had a harder time discovering. But then the other path would be outwards, where we would become part of the machine, part of the Borg. And whether you see, after Christianity in the Age of Pisces, the Age of Aquarius would have this other, probably majority of people going into this technological hive where the kind of wokeness that we were talking about right now, you're saying that is technology. That's what's pushing this particular flavor. And where exactly do you see this flavor going, and how different is this flavor going to be, like, I guess, in the middle of the Age of Aquarius, if we're going to look that far. So anyway, Chad, that's a lot of information, but I'm sure that you know exactly what to do with it, so go for it.
And there's a lot to discuss there, but the idea that one of the paths available for people in this technological age is to just become part of the machine. That's the irony, is that's what's actually happening, despite the fact that really the only archetype, to my knowledge, that they've been able to come up with after doing away with all of the old ones, for which Anita Sarkeesian herself, in her 2010 master's thesis, before she was infamous for Gamergate, if you want to know what she really thinks on an academic level, you just read that old master's thesis from York University. She says, we need to get rid of the old archetypes, but I can't tell you what the new ones will be. So that's the challenge. We have to experiment, basically. We just know that it won't entail things like sexism or racism or trans, all these things on a laundry list. It's not that, but I can't tell you what it's going to be. Well, really, the only thing they've been able to come up with is the idea of empowering women, but in a totally unrealistic manner. If you look at the Disney remakes, like Mulan, for example, in the original Mulan cartoon in the 1990s, she was an ordinary girl. She had limitations, and she had to struggle through challenges, and she did sort of prevail over them, but there was nothing magical about it. In the Mulan remake, they actually gave her superhero powers. And so too with this Cinderella, the whole point of the movie is just her own self-empowerment and her own illusion of having absolute freedom without any limitations. And this is also what makes the films just plain not interesting to watch. It's not a coincidence that Barbie is the exception among recent films. We have this massive decline in box office attendance, in which Disney alone has lost about $900 million producing these flop films nobody wants to watch. And people can fall back on things like, well, there were lockdowns, or, well, the price of a movie ticket is, what, $15 a ticket now in America, or something like that. But you have exceptions like Barbie, which people did watch precisely because it doesn't try to BS its way out of things that everybody knows is true. Everybody knows that mortality, for example, is a real problem. The Mulan film kind of tries to act as though it doesn't exist, but we all know that we're mortal. We all know that that's something which we can struggle against, but we'll never actually overcome. And this is really, if you scratch the surface, a film from 2023, but really just the oldest story ever told. If you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, as I was doing just yesterday, coincidentally, if you're learning Akkadian and Sumerian, it's interesting to look back at a lot of Epic of Gilgamesh. Gives you the oldest story ever told in the oldest languages ever written. And it's interesting to see that even that far back, even in the Sumerian and Akkadian cuneiform tablets, you still see the problem of mortality. The big problem for Gilgamesh is he is a person who seems to be like the most powerful within his group. So the gods create a double for him named Enkidu, the wild man. And they're partners for a while, they're partners in crime, right? They're a superhero and sidekick. And then one day Enkidu dies. And when Enkidu dies, who was explicitly created by the gods to be the double of Gilgamesh, someone equally strong, etc. When even he dies, Gilgamesh becomes obsessed with trying to figure out how to solve the problem of death. He's led from Mesopotamia all the way to the island of Bahrain, where he meets a man who is so old he lived before the Great Flood. And he learns that the secret of immortality is that he can eat a plant, which will make him immortal. Unfortunately, when he goes for a swim, a snake eats the plant, in what is really the same mythological archetype that you find in the Garden of Eden with the serpent and Adam and Eve. And at that point, knowing he can't have immortality, even though he had the chance, he has to go back into the world of mortality. And this is really what Barbie is about. This is what makes it an interesting story. She also has her double, who is the girl in the real world who plays with her. And the girl's anxieties of someone who has to live in a real world rather than a fantasy world of which is Barbie land, basically. Her anxieties get transitively passed on to the Barbie doll in much the same way that Enkidu's death is transferred over to Gilgamesh. She travels to the figurative Bahrain, which is the real world. She confronts the problem of her own mortality. And rather than go into the Barbie world where death doesn't really happen because time doesn't pass, she accepts it, and at the end we see her symbolically in a gynecologist's office, because the Hegelian irony here is that survival seems to mean what can I do to live forever, whereas in reality, survival is not of you but of the whole species. If you reproduce, then if you're a rabbit, for example, according to Hegel, no matter what that one rabbit does, it will always die. But if it reproduces, then rabbit, which is the name for the whole species, will live on. So this contrast between a movie that was successful because it deals with things dating back to the earliest records because they're universal problems we can't wish away, versus what you see with the new Snow White movie, I think does come down to technology, because the irony here is that Anita Sarkeesian acts as though we're free to create whatever archetypes we want to catch up with technological progress that's already happened for machines. But she misses the point that this technological progress comes at a cost. And that cost is just your own ability to think, because from a Kaczynskian and Elulian perspective, the further that technological progress advances, specifically in the form of thinking machines, artificial intelligence, the more there is a system of Darwinist natural selection put in place, in which only those humans who don't interfere with the decisions which the AI has already made will be favored by the process of natural selection to obtain things like positions of authority, influence, wealth. There's talk earlier in this discussion about the kind of people who make it into management positions are vividly unworthy, but they've been naturally selected into that position. Zegler was naturally selected into the position of a Hollywood celebrity, despite, quite frankly, her idiocy, because she's favoring what the global technological system already wants, which is the destruction of all of these mythological archetypes in favor of temporary linguistifications, which are just code words for advancing itself. To say very quickly, the funny thing about 68 genders from a Kaczynskian standpoint is that they're just a shorthand, they're just an intermediary on the way to a genderless society. You can have your choice now on a consumerist level of any one of 68 genders, questionable as the existence of some of them might be, because in the long term, this is just a way to get everybody to be exactly the same. You won't have any tendencies because you're a man or a woman, as was the case for the rest of human history. You'll behave exactly as the global technological system requires anyone in that position to behave. And at that point, you have people fully integrated into the exterior realm of the machine in much the same way that was predicted.
So it's almost like how I was talking in the beginning of this stream about these RPG characters in the West, all kind of like starting to look like each other regardless of whether it's a man or a woman. So yeah, I kind of see what you're getting at here, becoming part of the Borg. Now, since you mentioned Barbie, I do want to get back to Jack, because Jack, you also saw Barbie movie, you saw it today. What did you think? And also, do you agree with Chad's assessment here?
I sure did see it, and lately, since there are no reliable critical voices. There's no like Siskel and Ebert today to tell you if a movie is good or bad. So it's just this crapshoot of online contrarianism. So I never really know what to expect. I was predisposed to think Barbie would be not good because I thought that Greta Gerwig's Little Women and Lady Bird were extremely bland milquetoast examples of peak woke affirmative action mediocrities, especially her like age blind Little Women movie. I'm happy to say that I absolutely loved Barbie. I thought it was marvelous. And I can completely understand why people are flocking to see it. I think it's really impressive that something this sophisticated and weird and colorful and genuinely smart is generating billions of dollars just based on name recognition, brand recognition. Let's be honest, most people are going to see this movie just because it says Barbie on it and it's pink. If you go in Walmart or whatever, you will see the dead-eyed cow people wearing Barbie shirts. That's who's going to see this movie. They don't care about the content of this movie. They just see that it's pink and it says Barbie. It could be anything. A few years ago, this would have been a cookie cutter woke screed. Okay, the fact that it's not that, and it's one of these late examples of a movie or TV show that is clearly familiar with alt-right Twitter discourse, reactionary discourse. The casting of Ryan Gosling as Ken is entirely dependent on your intertextual familiarity with his image as an icon for alt-right incels. That's the joke.
And him making that Giga Chad pose.
Yes, and that was part of the. It's also like all the Ken stuff is directly like $1 Million Extreme World Peace, the like mail order boyfriend sketch where Charles looks like Ryan Gosling there, the blonde wig. That's what it is. That's what they're doing. Is Hollywood is trying to find ways to quietly escape the chains of wokeness. They're taking influence clearly from things like Red Scare. Above all, anytime anything is anti-woke, it becomes a massive hit because people can sense that it's real. So you have White Lotus. If it's not a hit, then everybody's talking about it, like The Idol. And
by the way, you were speaking with the creator of White Lotus on your wonderful podcast, so be sure to check out the Perfume Nationalist and watch that episode. It's really good. But anyway,
yeah, and he explicitly named Red Scare as an influence on that. Like there's always like people who don't know what's going on that come in and think that like Hollywood and like Twitter are two totally self-contained things, and like Barbie's appeal is very dependent on its kind of like internet meme savvy sort of reactionary vibe, where it's about gender discourse, and it pads this with a lot of all things to all people, sort of like crowd safe icing. Okay, so you can go to Barbie, you can watch Barbie, you can come away with the safe message that it's about being a girl boss and that men are bad. That's the surface thing. under the surface, there's a lot more going on, because it's really a vivid visualization of just how extremely entitled and out to lunch women are in today's modern world, where they have everything. They have Barbie world. They're the president. They're the CEO. They're whatever they want to be, but still, it's not enough, you know. And but I think it's a phenomenal movie, and it's a step in the right direction. And I think it's really cool that instead of just making a formulaic woke scold piece, which, Chad, you had a great point that female roles in a classic woke, like peak 2016 Hollywood product, it's boring to watch because there's a set of rules that's very simple, and it's that if something is a stereotype, you do the opposite. So it has no bearing in reality. A woman can't show any vulnerability. She can't be interested in romance. She can't be feminine. She has one expression, and it's this harsh masculine kind of like durability and capability. And it's like, you can't tell me what to do. You can't show women really screaming or being emotional. Like, all today's action movies don't show women screaming, because that makes them look feminine and reminds you that they're weaker. There's this kind of like, it's un-PC to show actual physics of how women are smaller and weaker. So you just kind of have this rubbery CGI where it's just a rigged game and they always beat the man no matter what. But Barbie deals with real things, and it deals with real gender issues. And it also is, to my knowledge, the first big Hollywood movie in years to show anything resembling sympathy to men, or show that the relentless onslaught of woke feminism and gender discourse has had contrary effects on men. So it's a very smart movie.
Now, Nina, even though you haven't seen it, you did do a lot of research on it. Do you agree with what Chad and Jack have to say about Barbie?
Well, I love Chad's Gilgamesh comparison. And when I do finally watch it, I will be thinking about that. Although I really think that the themes about, mortality, they're so very primal that I could see that happening without any conscious connection to Gilgamesh on the part of the filmmakers, but just that they're both dealing with this theme of mortality, which is always a great one. Everybody's thinking about it.
Well, there is another esoteric take that I have concerning the Barbie movie and mortality. But before we get to that, when it comes to the preachiness versus lack of preachiness in movies, where would you say Barbie is? Because there are certain messages that are in there. For example, there was that preachy segment about how Barbie is the, like a fascist, patriarchal example from that little girl.
But that character is repellent. You can't. Nobody's going to watch this movie, especially not the cattle people at Walmart, and be like, I so identify with the sour woke teen. No, this is like a mistake that people make in interpreting the Sex and the City continuation, which is similarly kind of like covertly anti-woke, is that because they have these gender goblin characters voicing this grim communist ideology, that's not who you relate to. It makes them look bad. Like that character is okay. Barbie includes, because it's this massive big budget vehicle, it includes something for everyone. It protects itself from any accusations of it being like right wing or not doing this or not doing that by including, the Latina family who identifies with the Barbie, and the daughter's a bitch who is woke, and the mother's like sad, and it includes that. So you can point and go, look, this is not a right wing white movie. Look, we have these boring Latinas here over there. Nobody gives a fuck about them, but they're there. It fills the movie with this bullshit, this stupid woke padding bullshit. But guess what? Guess what image you're left with fucking Barbie. That's the reason that everybody goes to see the movie. It's the towering, beautiful, white fascist faces of Margot Robbie as Barbie and Ryan Gosling as Ken. It's the fucking Ubermensch. That's what people want. That's what they want. The 80s, they want the vaporwave, they want the shallow, they want the thinness, they want the high heels. They don't want the fucking woke teenager who says, but Barbie's a fascist. They don't care. That's just something to appease critics.
Wow. Slay Queen. What could I say? Okay. So when it comes to the whole death thing, I really like Chad's example of Gilgamesh. Now I'm gonna throw in another one, which has to do with Shiva and Shakti. And curious, Chad, whether you would agree or not, that as soon as Barbie mentioned death, and she was living in this, perfect world of Barbie land, I started thinking about death as being like this ultimate masculine entity of Shiva, where in tantric Hinduism, you have Shiva, who is basically, from what I understand, he is the personification of destruction, death, nothingness. And then you have Shakti, which is the female energy, and that's the energy of Maya. That's the energy that kind of animates the universe. It basically fills up everything that's around us, and it kind of keeps us living in this reality. Now, I'm trying to see if there is a stronger connection to be made with that in Barbie. Chad, what do you think?
Well, Shiva has indeed been interpreted in those terms, even on an etymological level. Sadhguru claimed that Shiva could be interpreted as some Sanskrit pun meaning no thing. And the irony here is that what really is real is no thing, because things, as far as we're immersed in them in daily experience, that's actually just Maya. That's a certain illusion, right? And the idea that you have a spiritual awakening when you realize that the things of this world are not really real because some force of destruction really is. That's been compared to the double negation. Julius Evola wrote in Metaphysics of War in one of the essays that the real point of the Bhagavad Gita, although that's narrated by Vishnu rather than Shiva, is when talking to the warrior Arjuna, who's about to fight not just against anonymous soldiers from another country he's never met, but rather against his own family, and thinks pathologically that that's unethical. I can fight people I don't know. I can't fight people I've loved in the past. Vishnu tells him that what would really be unethical is being too cowardly to fight them, because your insistence that I have to make an exception in this case because I know these people, they're my family, that's just another part of the illusion of Maya. What's really real beyond that is a destructive force. And this is in a time, by the way, in the world of tradition, in which not everyone had immortality. Julius Evola noted that we take for granted today that everybody, when they die, within Christian tradition anyway, either goes to heaven or they go to hell. That's really not an idea from the ancient world of tradition. Immortality was only for those who've earned it. Valhalla within Norse mythology.
Well, there was reincarnation, so you could be born as something higher or lower, depending.
Reincarnation's a curse. The point of Buddhism is to break the dreadful cycle of reincarnation. Sikhism also, the point of Sikhism is to escape the dreadful cycle of reincarnation, which is defined by karma, impersonal action from past lifetimes following you mysteriously into those subsequent lifetimes and causing you suffering in ways that you really cannot understand. A lot of the characters in the Ramayana and Mahabharata have hardships they have no idea the origin of, but because Vishnu is God, he sees the past lifetimes and knows the origin of these sufferings. So the goal of Hinduism and Sikhism and Buddhism, all three of them, is to break that cycle, although by different means. And one of the ways perhaps to do that is to realize destruction not as maybe the Western archetype of that which is supremely to be avoided, right? That's how we kind of think of destruction within the West, but rather maybe identifying with it. Now, the question whether that is what you have with the movie Barbie, I don't know. Because,
well, she started in the end identifying with her mortality once she became a human being. So this wasn't something that she was running away before in this world of illusion. So in that way, you could say that she and Ken, talking about I am Ken, ended up getting wiser in the end of the movie. I don't know, like, Jack, is this me reaching too much in the metaphysical gobbledygook, or do you see, like, I don't know if this kind of stuff is something that you ever looked at, but as far as there being, like, this quality of ascendance in somebody who starts to understand their own mortality and grow from that, do you see some connection here?
I didn't think overly much about the Barbie becoming aware of death stuff, because it seemed like pretty standard growing up narrative material. It's just like you grow up and you're no longer in Barbie world and you have cellulite and you're like, I think less about that. And I do think the movie gets a bit messy in the last like 20 minutes. I think the first like 75% of it is rock solid perfect, and then that's when the padding and the sort of like quasi apologies to protect themselves come in, where it's like, you know, the Barbies have to retake the world from Ken because, you know, the patriarchy is bad, even though it just showed all the Barbies liking patriarchy and liking the hot guys, and the audience obviously likes the hot guys and likes the patriarchy. And then it, you know, devolves into this like, you can be anything. Being Barbie means just being yourself, and, you know, like, whatever. Like, that's not the point of the movie. The point of the movie is the first 3/4 of it, where it's a really solid narrative trambling forward of Ken being an incel and Barbie being a girl boss who is entitled to the entire world. Like, that's the real stuff. So, you know, in a movie this full of color and visuals and ideas, I didn't hover too long on the meaning of the, you know, your own mortality stuff.
Well, I think that that's kind of what makes it a good movie, is that you have so many different things that people glean from it, both on this very superficial sheep layer like we were talking about earlier, as well as the layer that you were talking about, and the layer that Chad and myself were also talking about. Like, there's all kinds of ways of viewing this thing, but I don't know, like, Chad, as far as, and for Nina as well, even though you did not watch the movie yet, but I think you got a pretty good idea of what's going on here. Would you say that in your own lives there has been more of a focus on the question of mortality, and also the question of, like, when we're talking about the end of the Barbie movie, like, Barbie could be whatever you want to be, that's also like a question of humanity, of you know, if I were to get a little bit more esoteric about it. Jason Giorgiani, guest of the show, good guest of the show, he talks about how he does not like the word human being. He prefers the word human becoming, where, according to him, humans have this tendency, unlike all the other animals, and I agree with him here, to change into something from utilizing their own willpower, while the animals are just like going through the cycles. And we could say in a way that a lot of humanity is also going through these cycles, but people do have the ability to get out of one cycle, get out of like one layer of Plato's cave and go into another one. Like, for example, yourself, Jack, I think you are, just like myself, very much influenced by high quality movies, and it's something that inspires you. Personally, I have not been a perfume person, but at the same time, I am very much into incense, and some of my favorites include the Young Living frankincense. I don't know if you ever smelled that. It's like, it has a very sweet smell to it. I mean, it's very simple. Like, it's like there was in your podcast about Salo, when you were talking about this very almost hell-like perfume that's very old. So, do you still have it, by the way?
I do still have some of that bottle that I bought so many years ago for that. I have a bit. And actually, okay, you're talking about Norma Kamali incense, which is this legendary, long discontinued, really stark, really scary incense fragrance. It's basically one aroma chemical, one ingredient called hydrocarbo resin, which you can order like from a perfume company. You can order the oil and it smells just like that incense. Just FYI.
Wow. All right, there we go. Now I know, because I do want to maybe put it in the air and then watch Salo, because I've never watched Salo before. That's going to be a good way to watch Salo, I think. Just like
so good.
Having that much.
Watch it while you can. They're always coming for. I'm always waiting for the day when, you know, because its ubiquity is kind of permitted by this completely ridiculous framing of like it's telling you that the Holocaust is bad. Like
What is
like
Salo?
yeah.
What is it?
Like all the Criterion like essays and everything are like, so this movie is about how fascism is bad, okay, and like that's what we're learning from this.
Well,
And
Jack,
no, what it actually
me,
is like child pornography and classic Italian.
We gotta watch it though. This is the world of YouTube, and they probably have some kind of bots here that can. But anyway, Jack, can you tell Nina what exactly Salo is?
It's based on
Marquis de Sade.
It's based on the Marquis de Sade's 120 Days of Sodom, which is this like
okay, yeah, all right.
His last book, which is like a list of ridiculous, elaborate tortures. It's like unfinished, but Pier Paolo Pasolini in the 70s made an adaptation of it that pretty much went further than any movie has ever gone, you know, and it's this very Baroque arty thing of showing these various tortures and everything, but it's very shocking now because, you know, it's all these Italian teenagers who are like 15 and stuff, and it's famous with horror fans as an extreme movie, and but they always have to, you know, kind of provide this like kind of educational defense that it's showing you how Nazis are bad. So
okay, great. Hey, do movies have a future, do you think? Like movies used to take they used to have such a privileged place. They were really hard to make. It took a lot of skill and money and technology to make them. And now the tools are available to everyone. They're ubiquitous. There's more stuff on YouTube than anybody could watch. And now even with AI tools, it's like all kinds of fabulous animation can be made with great ease. So I guess I asked this question because some people are asking me, oh, are you going to make another movie? Oh boy, make another movie. And I'm just like, well, why? I mean, everybody can make a movie now. When I was making movies, when I made Sita, it was more meaningful, but it's like, I don't really think movies are the thing. They're not a special thing anymore. There's a zillion of them.
I think they're going away. Okay, I have several thoughts. I do think that things are getting better after the woke censorship haze code of the last half decade. I think that there are more good movies, at least trying to be ideologically free in the last like year or two, especially. But in terms of will people go to a theater to see an R-rated adult drama, realistic adult drama? No, that's going away. The theater exists, but it's for these big event things, not all of which are bad, but most of which are bad.
That's been true for well over 10 years.
Yeah,
that theaters are just for blockbusters.
I think the biggest problem now is this refusal to make content for or about adults. Everything is in this permanent, like, kind of Peter Pan, childish state. So there's this preoccupation with horror now, because horror is fantasy, so it's safe. So horror is the dominant genre right now. But a movie like, you know, like Kramer versus Kramer or something, it's just about like grown-ups. That doesn't exist now.
Well, I predict that in the future we're gonna have Peekaboo the movie. That's gonna be the reigning Oscar winner. Like
Peekaboo, like Pikachu.
No, Peekaboo. It's like doing this.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
That's literally
right. Okay.
But will it be the horror genre?
Yeah,
right?
So like there's
that is like this everything goes black.
Well, that is the horror genre, because like the surprise, that's gonna be the level of horror that adults are going to be waiting in line.
Where did she go?
And they're all gonna be like wearing diapers by that point anyway. They're all gonna be obese. They're gonna be wearing diapers. I mean, they're not even going to go to the movie theater because movie theaters will be extinct. They'll have the Neuralink HoloLens hooked up to their brain, so they're just gonna see like this peekaboo thing, and they're just going to be in this state, and that's going to be humanity. That's going to be the Kali Yuga, Age of Aquarius. But then there's going to be like a few of us who are going to be like doing meditation, and we are going to go within, and we're going to figure out a way to like obtain siddhis. And Chad, you are in the belly of the beast. You are in the belly of Kali in India. Tell me, are siddhis real? Can we obtain siddhis? I know that's not the goal, but it still seems kind of like fun. Like I was reading this book Agora, which I highly recommend. Like Jack, I don't know if you are also into let's say scarier things. We were talking about horror before. This is a very scary book. It's about these ascetics in India who do things like they would meditate on top of a dead body, and they would do that in the cremation grounds. They would constantly be around death. And the reason why they do that, from what I have read, is because being around death makes them less attached to the cycle of life. But as a result of that, they end up meeting these various entities like Tara and Kali, and they end up getting superpowers, apparently. Unless this whole thing is just a bunch of lies. Chad, is there something to this? Is there something to these siddhis, these powers?
Well, there was a man in my own village, a friend of mine, who claimed that he had himself absorbed one of these spirits. It was a incident in which, after much of the meditation religious practice that you've been mentioning, he had a flash of light in the room, and one of these spirits was interiorized, and it gave him certain powers. He knew certain things about people intuitively, certain things. He was able to correctly know certain things about my own past in America that I never told because he'd been given this intuitive power. So there's this formula that John Michael Greer uses within magic, which is TSRW. This stuff really works. And say what you will about maybe the explanation for it, I think that on a practical level, you can see the fruits of these results. The reason you don't see that in the West is because the very context in which you could do the practice without the question of the explanation of how has largely disappeared. One of my friends from Nepal living in New York, who is a practicing Hindu, has lamented, I'm just taking his word for it, that even the temples in, he's both a Buddhist and a Hindu, even the temples in New York, he said, are largely at this point just absorbed into the pro-technical thing, maybe because many of the workers, maybe the attendants are themselves working in tech industry. I don't know. I'm only going on his word, but he was making it sound as though even if you go to temple in a place like New York, you're not necessarily going to have a context there as free from technological meditation as would ideally be the case.
Wait, what's technological meditation?
Technological mediation, technological interference. There is no technological meditation. That's a contradiction in terms.
Wait, so we're talking about like Wi-Fi and things like that? What exactly do you mean?
Well, he means the ideology. The idea, you won't find challenges to technological progress talked about in such places, perhaps because many of the workers there, many of the attendants are themselves working with an industry. Whatever the explanation might be, I'm only going on what he said. He was lamenting that you're not going to as much find an alternative to technological interference, even if you go to those places, which are supposed to be explicitly spiritual releases from the illusion of Maya, which modern technology is, of course, the worst example of.
Very interesting. I mean, for somebody like yourself, Jack, and for somebody like yourself, Nina, you guys are aficionados of the beautiful things in life. Like, you both have tremendous taste, as well as yourself, Chad. But Chad, like, you are more into the philosophy and the spirituality, things of that nature. You guys are more into the arts. So when it comes to this age that we're entering into right now, according to what we talked about, where we are going to have Peekaboo the movie, and we are going to have a majority of people who are going to be completely disconnected from reality, no matter how many good movies come around or TV shows like White Lotus, eventually, if that does go away, I don't know, like, do you guys imagine just sitting somewhere with your collection of like the greatest works of art that have ever been created, and just that is how you will finish up the journey here? or do you want to start seeing what else could possibly be done here of this seed heat type we were talking about earlier? Nina, go first.
Have you ever meditated for 7 hours in a day?
Not 7 hours yet. I'd say maybe 2 hours. You have,
Okay.
I take it.
Well, these 100-mile bike rides that I take, I can't really deal with sitting meditation, but a long bike ride, I think, serves that purpose for me. So now you know why I do these crazy long bike rides.
And
I
why
really
you have so much energy afterwards. People were asking, like, how do you have all this energy?
I don't have energy afterwards. I don't. I'm a wreck afterwards, but I love it. I just love it. It's like just there's nothing in my I mean, there's thoughts in my mind, but they can't hurt me. There and it's really the only way that I can clean out my mind. And that's not super uncommon. And it's also good for my physical fitness, my health overall. In the winter, I hibernate. I can only do this in the summer and the fall, like warm weather. But that's what I do. Obviously, I'm using long bike rides to get through life.
Well, the health benefits and all that is definitely noticeable on you, Nina. Like, I don't know how old you are, but you have the energy of a 30-year-old, I'd say.
Well, I don't really have that energy, but thank you.
That's what it seems like to me. But
and in the winter, I look different and I feel different and I gain 10 or 20 pounds because I'm, just not burning up calories. But I make art in the winter. I'm just a bear. I hibernate, and that's art time. That's like the inward art time. And then spring, start bicycling again, and you get in shape again, and it's just cycles.
Well, speaking of bears, Jack, how are you? Sorry, I had to throw that one in there. So how do you deal with what is potentially coming up right now? Like, you have a really successful podcast and you get to talk with all these interesting people. That seems to be a good way of going about things. But would you ever want to pick up any new things like meditation or like bike riding or something that can make this time on Earth even better than it already is for you?
You're telling me to ride bikes?
100 miles. You have to do it 100 miles in one day.
I mean, I go for a walk. I go for walks,
That's good.
Classical
okay, yeah.
people don't do that these days. Wait, I thought we were talking about like the future of art. Now it's about walks and
yes.
It's about how do you deal with this horrendous world?
I'm fundamentally optimistic. I pray. I have a very loose, kind of Protestant Christian outlook. I pray for guidance, and I always tell the truth, and everything seems to work out. And as far as like the future of art or holding up with the great works against nature style, I don't think too much about it. I mean, just most people's perspective and worldview now is so incredibly narrow after the last decade of ideological conditioning that there's just an entire world of beautiful truth there, ripe for the picking. And it hasn't even occurred to most people to even do things like read popular fiction from 30 years ago or more. It's just everybody's very stuck in their little routine of consuming mediocre kind of woke ideology content, maybe being outraged about that on the internet and not knowing what to do about it. There's just a whole world of things to expose yourself to, and hopefully new art and new ideas can be creative, and we will get out of this cycle of regurgitating and recycling existing intellectual properties. But you can't do that under woke liberalism, because woke liberalism is about a denial of truth and a fundamental denial of objective reality. So people have to free themselves from that. And you also have to frankly not answer to any liberals in your life, which is really hard for most people. You can't afford to have them in your life because they'll always win.
I'm a
Did
liberal.
you come from
classic
the
liberal.
tribe of liberal, Jack? Like,
No, I
did you
was
grow up
never
with
a
it?
liberal. I mean, I voted when I was 19 or whatever. I voted for Obama like everyone did, but that was a different that time had nothing to do with with today. It was just a different
No,
thing.
well,
a
would
different
you say
symbol.
that you have certain values that would have traditionally been called liberal values?
Yeah, I mean, the whole like just standing up for free speech and being against censorship has now become this like de facto like right-wing conservative value, which is ridiculous. But I consider myself to be a very like 60s hippy dippy mind expansion about most of this stuff. My thoughts on
So you do
I'm
have a
not like
liberal
that's like
background.
sexually conservative in this way that today's conservatards are. The straight people be freaking out about.
Yeah, mostly they doth protest too much when it comes to
Yeah,
certain...
straight people be getting mad about sex stuff every day, and I like largely don't care. I'm not like rabidly anti-abortion or anything either. I would consider myself a feminist in most aspects. So yeah, being like a regular liberal from like 10 years ago it now forces you to brand yourself as this like alt-right guy, goes on YouTube and demolishes stuff with facts and logic, and that's like retarded. That's not what I am. I've stayed the same. It's the pictures that have gotten smaller. I've stayed the same. I've said the same fucking things my entire life. It's everybody else who was such a coward and so dependent on the approval of the little communists in their life that they changed. And I don't know, I'm fundamentally optimistic.
I think Nina and probably Chad as well, but I definitely know Nina's in the same boat. You have not really changed that much when it comes to your positions, but everything around you, including the animation community, has... I don't know, I mean, are you still in good relations with some people from that whole sphere? Because, Jack, just so you know, and Chad, Nina and I go back to 2004. That's when I first met Nina at an animation event in New York City with Bill Plimpton and Patrick Smith and all these really cool cats. And they're all still cool, but other people are not. So it makes me think, because of Nina's stance as a TERF, whether the modern animation community would welcome somebody like Nina or would welcome somebody like yourself, Jack, and yourself, Chad. That's what I'm still trying to figure out right now, because like you said about Hollywood, that they are aware of certain things that go on, some people at least, like I'm sure Greta, as we were talking about, and White Lotus. But as far as the general tendency of people in the public sphere to denounce certain things that must be denounced, that's still going to be pretty strong. And like Nina, do you agree about the animation world not being as welcoming right now, or do you think that that's it's not so much the animation world, it's more just like some super loud people that are forcing everybody else to shut up?
It's film in general. I mean, I am technically a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. I'm a member emeritus because living in Urbana, Illinois, paying my membership fee will not get me any tasty benefits like screenings with snacks. So I don't pay the membership fee, which means I can't vote. But they do send me emails from time to time. And it's just like, this is like, Jack would have a field day with this. This is just Hollywood nonsense, like this is, the whole industry is just, it's pronoun land and ideas about diversity that are not helpful. I mean, I do like the idea of real diversity, but that's not what they're going for. So yeah, it's the movie industry overall. There are only a few people that actively targeted me and spread lies about me, but there's tons of other people that just go along with it. There's tons of other people that do nothing when the scapegoat is being scapegoated or when the witch is being burned.
I love
So,
that comment,
no-
by the way. I don't remember who did it, but the witch is being burned, and then the guy who's like setting the fires whispers to her and says, "I'm secretly on your side. I agree with what you're saying."
That's right. I agree with you 100%
Yeah.
while they're lighting the fire
Mhm.
underneath. So people are very cowardly. And this is the big issue of my life right now is how do I live in this world where I know what people are worse, even worse than I thought they were. And I was not a big fan of people before, but now I'm just like, okay, this is human nature. Bad thing happened to me. I'm aware of all these bad things happening to other people too, but I care about it more when it happens to me. But I know there's all kinds of bad stuff. And how do I live in the world when, mobs have gone after me and where so many people have displayed so much cowardice, including people that I really cared about and used to respect. And I don't know, but I used to say that, the trauma that caused me to make Sita Sings the Blues, being dumped by my husband by email while he was in India and I was in New York, I said that was the defining trauma of my adult life, but that was prior to being canceled. And that is the defining trauma of my last 8 years. And I need to find a way to trust people. I need to function. So I don't really know what I'm going to do about it. The good news, I don't think the nasty people and the cowards are ever going to change, but there are so many more people who are fed up. Like there's more and more people that have been canceled, and there's more and more people that have been called names, and more people that have been told that they're hateful bigots when they are anything but. There's more and more people that are called Nazis who, like me, are Jewish. It's like, please don't call us. That's just not right. And there's just so many now that even though there aren't that many people standing up, there are more people just like stepping away. And there's enough people like that to support people like me, because there was a while where it was scary. And I like lost all this support, but now there's like enough people that are actually, they're just like, oh, this woman's been canceled. I'm going to go support her because this is messed up and I'm sick of this. And I don't know when everybody else is going to wise up and stop this bullshit, but the balance of things is changing.
Well, there are people like J.K. Rowling, for instance, who I think do act as a sort of anchor in this eye of the storm to get people like yourself and other people to not be besmirched by people who are not worth any second thought. Like, especially...
No, but they don't just besmirch J.K. Rowling. They have no shame. There is like no end. The lies that they say about J.K. Rowling are ridiculous, and they insist on it. They just... Like there's zero evidence. There's only evidence to the contrary. But these people just keep
fuck them. But fuck them. Like if there is enough fuck you money out there for J.K. Rowling and other people who can support people like her and like you, like I don't know, Jack. Do you see kind of like ending this on a silver lining type of note? Do you see there being this eye of the storm of people, regardless of their political beliefs, that they are able to come together because they were persecuted in some way or know people who were persecuted, and those are the people who say, you know what, I've had enough, I am going to support good art, I'm going to establish friendships with people who also believe in the freedom to express yourself, and collectively there may be enough funds, enough, I don't know, private security contractors, I don't know, something to actually build up a defense against these, Borgs that are possibly coming, who after they watched Peekaboo the movie are just going to be programmed to, go and raid people's houses.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know.
you have to create your own world. I mean, I had to create my own world and let them come to me. And one of the, if you want to see the silver lining, one of the positives of being canceled or piled on or, experiencing a witch burning is that at least in me, it created this enormous drive and this energy to win. To prove them wrong, and I did. So it's just like the more hated you are, you can use that as fuel to just keep winning. It just requires going through this cultural moment requires extreme emotional stamina, and you have to learn how to manage it, especially if you're doing something on Twitter or on these online spheres where you just are faced with just tides of cruelty about yourself like you've never seen. You have to get used to it. You have to move on. You have to learn that you're not going to please those people. You have to create your own world and let people come to you, and they will see that fundamental honesty, and good people will come to you. You have to create your own networks. I think a lot of kind of more lefty people that have sort of hitched their wagon to this anti-woke moment, they might have tasted a little bit of success through the old systems, and they're very bitter about not having that. I never had that, and everything that I created came after becoming a pariah, and all of the liberals that I knew stopped talking to me, so I didn't have to answer to them. My advice is you can't have liberals in your personal life that you have to answer to, because they will wield that as power, and you will always be disappointed. You will always be disappointed, even if they like being around you, kind of slumming because they can say naughty things around you. They will draw the line at some point and assert that they are good, you are bad. So you've got to really get a hold on who you keep around you and know that they're actually fighting the good fight. But you have to create your own world outside of the need for liberal or institutional approval. And a lot of people, a growing number of people, want to see that, want to see creativity, freedom of speech, laughter, fun, art, want to fight against censorship. There's all of this going on right now. You just, you're not going to just find similar-minded friends from like going to a bar or something anymore. You have to go on the internet.
No one does go to a bar
anymore. No, I went to a bar recently. I had a shot of whiskey or 2 shots of whiskey, and I just started making random conversations with people. It was a lot of fun. But at the same time, I could tell how different that society was. Like, it was just like these dudes, and they were really good dudes. But they were just, they go to work, and then they go to this bar, and it's like, all right, like, there's... okay, what can we talk about, Like, I'm sure maybe there are certain things, but I understand what you mean about, like, this community that kind of knows the memes, knows certain things that people have gone through here.
But like Nina said, the more people are canceled, the more empathy and understanding there is about that, because it's just about happened to everyone who is any kind of public figure at this point, and you truly don't understand how bad it is until it happens to you, like Lady Gaga song, until it happens to you. But truly, I mean, like, if it's never happened to you and you don't have to see it, then you just think, oh, why don't you just not look at it? Oh, why don't you just like not let it like, no, it's different when it happens to you, and you understand when other people experience it. If you have.
And then that poor actress. So then I think about the poor 22-year-old actress who's having to deal with all this and is like unprepared for it.
Yeah, I
You
hope
can't
she
be
has.
prepared for it.
I hope she has a good life, but the problem is that, kind of going back to what we said before about the teenage girls society being built around pleasing them and uplifting them. It seems like with all the uplifting, there was a study recently that was talking about the very high rates of suicides among these same teenage girls. And it's almost like the more of this feel good, you go girl energy is there, the more it's almost like an addiction in a way, isn't it? Like the more of that is brought to you, the more of it you wanted, and as soon as something goes wrong, then your entire house of cards tumbles down. And that is like a very anti-fragile approach, if you will, right? Like, how exactly can we make it better? I mean, we probably can't unless we're talking about like a small group of people who are within our lives. That's the only thing that we can control.
I just had a weird thought, and
Yeah.
I'm talking out my ass right now. But I do wonder if what we call cancel culture represents a particularly feminine form of aggression. I mean, Me Too was the original one, right? Me Too, and it seemed like, initially I was like, oh, this is good, I think, call these men out. But then it was like, no, something's not right about this. It was the first like really big online mob thing. And, in my cancel thing and in the world of gender bullshit, women are very involved on both sides. They're very the handmaidens, as we call them, the trans activists supporting women are very vocal and active, and also the women that are saying no, like me, are also. But it's like, I think there's maybe even more women involved overall. Women are just very active in it. And I'm just wondering, like female aggression is a bit different than male aggression, as it has to be, because we don't have the upper body strength of men.
Well,
so men can just punch each other.
You don't need that online. You don't need that on the internet.
You don't need it online, but there are still like this sort of behavior, I think. Again, talking out my butt, so it's good that you're arguing. I just want to finish shitting out this ill-formed thought. But women girls, like high school girls, mean girls gang up on other girls, spread rumors. They do a lot of, they're like expert reputation assassins. And I just wonder if this is somehow related to that. Not saying men don't do it. Men totally do it. Like the patterns in my town when I was canceled in my town, like a lot of the most psychotic actors were men. There were just a few of them. And then there were like a lot of women supporting them, or they were doing it with the support of women. They were sort of like leaders of, I don't know.
Well, actually, adding to that, Jack, would you say that would also apply to gay men? Again, not to stereotype, but in general, like, is there some kind of quality that Nina's talking about here?
Gays love, much as women love to join in on the pile-on on another woman, gays love to join in on a pile-on on another gay. Because gays are always envious of whichever gay got the spotlight, which they think that they are entitled to. But something that I've always thought about online cancel culture and pile-ons and witch burnings and whatnot, and that I get made fun of for saying a lot, is that I think that it's an explicitly sexual urge. I think it's a sublimated kind of sexual gang rape kind of urge, because a lot of it that you see from transgenders is from people with no like literal physical kind of sexual outlet. Okay, like all like external exercise of sexual impulses has been stigmatized and sort of banned. So you have this little, neuromancer world on the internet, and there's this enormous kind of quasi-sexual thrill in these morality pile-ons where it's like I'm morally correct, so I have license to do whatever I want to you, no limit, you know. Just a thought. I've always called it spectral rape.
Spectral,
because it's like being raped by ghosts.
Oh my god.
It's like being raped by a bunch of ghosts. And this is explicitly a part of transgender online culture. It's built into it, you know.
Yeah.
The kind of policing and the pile-ons, and like, you know, they're in the group chats and they're like selecting targets and they say go after them. It's built into it.
I know, Chad. I mean, we're gonna end this for right now, but any thoughts on this spectral rape? I mean, I know, like in the going back to.
I've been spectrally raped.
I've been spectrally raped. Look, I'm a survivor.
Yeah, I'm a survivor too of spectral rape.
Only thing I can think of as far as a connection, like with the Agories, you know, I'm sure that they have visits from various ghosts that actually do spectrally rape them quite literally. I don't know.
Don't go there.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, that is kind of being possessed, right? Like, and you could say that the people who are on the internet, they are also being possessed by a kind of hauntology, by a kind of spirit that makes them want to gang up on people. So I don't know. I'm trying to
before Chad responds, I have another thought about like masculinity. So maybe we could look at. Sorry, I'm channeling my inner incel here. Maybe the internet is like totally demasculinizing men, right? Because there's so much about young men, especially. They have these young bodies that can be very strong, right? Like as Anna Slett says, men long for the mines. You know, labor, working, using those bodies.
Yeah, like Ken was doing in the Barbie movie, exactly.
and the internet, just like everybody's sort of disembodied on the internet and dissociated from their bodies. And women are naturally somewhat weaker than men, so women do less of that. Of course, we're embodied also, but women have these less physical strategies for coping, but you know, men are just this is an ill-formed thought, but men, like maybe there is, like people talk about like, oh, the feminization of men, you know, like it's because of these feminists, they're all trying to control men and feminize men, and it's like maybe it's not the feminists, maybe it's technology, maybe it's like a lot of social factors, and this is like a consequence of it.
Well, Chad, you're the technology expert here. What say you?
If you think about the problem of people becoming nastier online than they ever could be in a more face-to-face context, you know, back in the days of hunter-gatherers, the only way you could communicate was face-to-face, okay? And the psychologists to this day can measure the signal in terms of its expense. So whereas a face-to-face communication entails a high cost because of the physical proximity, the risk for being punched if you overstep a certain limit, an online form of communication like Twitter is a cheap signal. It doesn't cost you much to send it. It's effortless. You just get your 150 characters. It's short. You just hit send on your smartphone, and it's reached its recipient. And you don't have to have physical proximity where you feel like the kind of risk of anything negative coming back to you is real enough as it would have been in the hunter-gatherer worldview, or even more recently than that, sending a letter in the mail was a more expensive signal to send because you had to pay for the stamp. You had to physically write the thing out and put it in the mailbox. So as the signal has become cheaper, it's allowed us to become nastier, but it's more than just that. It's also the problem of technology resulting in very different kinds of consequences than even the most intelligent people who designed it could have envisioned. This is something you find in Ted Kaczynski's first chapter of Anti-Tech Revolution, Why and How. It's titled Why a Complex Human Society Can Never Be Steered, even by people who seem to have the power to do so. Presidents, prime ministers, the head of the Fed, all of these people might have, in a certain sense, the ability to push through a big change, but they're powerless to have that change result in the kinds of things they envisioned. A great example of this, cited by Kaczynski himself, is in the 18th century, Enlightenment thinkers figured that the result of automation would be a society of Mozarts and Shakespeares. The only reason they theorize that more people couldn't learn to compose classical music or write great poetry or to do painting on the scale of like a Raphael or a Michelangelo is that obviously the masses are burdened with all of this boring physical labor that has to be done on a daily basis just to meet very basic survival needs. In the time of Jesus, women spent 3 hours every day grinding grain just to be able to make bread the next day. So these intellectuals assumed, because they'd obviously been given some sort of privilege to not have to do as much physical labor as their peers had to do. They figured if you extended that to everyone, of course you would have a society filled with geniuses. Of course, we got the exact opposite. The paradox is that having nothing to do all day made people less capable of thinking and less interested in intellectual activities. You couldn't force most people today to go through the trouble of learning the kind of technical music theory that you would need to begin playing Mozart or Beethoven, let alone composing like them. It takes hours and hours of a kind of intellectual work which they're simply not suited for. Alexander Bard, the great Swedish contemporary philosopher,
and friend
that
of the
we
show.
don't live in the era of a great thinker of our era, noted in his book, Digital Libido, this isn't the era of capitalism, this is the era of attentionalism, because in the era of material abundance we're living in, the scarcest thing is simply attention. And the irony of the internet, we were talking earlier about the future of art. The irony is that you have an enormous archive that has seemed to have fulfilled the technical function of preserving all of this art. You have access on archive.org to long since out of print books on a wide variety of topics. The past few months, I read 4 books on the Sumerian language for free from archive. These are old scholarly texts from various university libraries from 100 years ago. You can learn Sumerian and Akkadian, Babylonian, Egyptian, all of the materials there for free. The problem is, if you remain connected to the internet, you can and you can't use it. The same thing that gives you this archive of information is the same thing that makes it impossible to sit through all the hours needed to learn a language like Sumerian or Babylonian, because it's just so much easier to jump on Twitter and see what was just tweeted about. And that's the difficulty here is you have the big change go through, which is, in that case, the archive that saved all these materials that otherwise would have been inaccessible, but with the unexpected side effect that it also destroys your attention span to the point that you can't use it as intended. And with social media, to bring it back to this, we had the technology to connect the world. And Mark Zuckerberg, in one infamously stupid interview with CNN's Lori Segal, said that the purpose of Facebook was to connect the world, to be able to solve problems that were too difficult for any one person. Cancer is a problem which no individual is smart enough to solve. But if we connect the whole world, we can have a cure for cancer appear in somebody's status update. Well, the problem with this is that the unexpected side effect of connecting the world technologically was it made it easier than ever before to send those cheap signals with no risk of consequences. And it also made it easier than ever before to become a literal psychopath, the kind of person who could inflict the kind of torture on others precisely because they couldn't see their face. It was proven by psychologists that a lot of trolling is it's enabled to reach psychopathic levels precisely because the hunter-gatherer instincts built into face-to-face communication that would lead you to feel empathy have been canceled out. So you have the big change once again, which is the internet, but with the exact opposite side effect than even the seemingly most intelligent people who designed it could have imagined.
Damn. Once again, this is definitely going to be a stream that I'm going to be extracting a hell of a lot of shorts from, because all of you guys, you are on fire. You've been on fire this entire time, despite how late it is. I mean, Jack, I don't know what time it is for you. I mean, Chad, it's the morning, the birds are chirping, and it's good to be here in India. I hope to visit one day. You've been telling us lots of lovely things about it and the people and how you can get like a tailor locally without having to buy like all of this Walmart crap. So, yeah, like...
For just a few dollars. It's amazing how many things you can get here for just a few dollars or less.
And
including
the food.
good food.
The food is so good in Kerala. Oh man.
Oh man, I'm coming. Jack, you're coming with us, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I love that Indian perfume culture.
Yeah, they're really good when it comes to the incense and all that. So listen, guys, thank you so much for this amazing stream. I always appreciate all of you guys being here. Jack, this is your second time on BTR. Always great to have you. I would love to have you back. And of course, same thing with Nina and Chad. Well, Chad, we're going to be on with Jason Giorgiani soon. That's going to be happening. Just a small announcement. Next week, we are going to have, as I mentioned before, meme analysis coming back to BTR. He hasn't been here in a long while. Met him at a party recently. And we are going to be talking about the whole age of Aquarius, what exactly is going to be happening there. So very interesting episode, and I think Gnostic Informant is going to be there, as well as my, I don't know if you guys are into astrology. Are you guys into astrology?
I'm not.
A little bit.
We're going to have my friend Michael Scotto, the master astrologer. He's going to be back, and this is going to be at 9 p.m. again, late stream. And he's going to be taking all of your astrological readings in terms of the Super Chat auction. So whoever gives the most in Super Chats ends up being the first for the reading. And like the runners-up, he's going to do them afterwards, within like a certain amount. So we're gonna get to everybody. Don't worry. And also, patreon.com/breaktherules. Listen, guys, we're finally going to have the first Patreon exclusive stream in a long while with Dodge Landisman. And I want to make this announcement right now because this is a very interesting dude. I've known Dodge not as long as I've known Nina, but I've known him since like the early 2010s. And he's a very interesting dude who was an Arizona news anchor who was fired after Scientologists complained about the Lisa Marie Presley coverage he was doing, where he was planning a takedown of the religion, where she was planning a takedown of the religion before her death. So he claims that Presley was on the precipice of testifying for the prosecution in the rape trial of actor and Scientologist Danny Masterson. And after that, his station fired him, and then he went into another media thing, but they also didn't really want to touch the Scientology story. So guess what? We're touching it on Patreon, patreon.com/breaktherules, and I welcome all the patrons who become patrons to join in the discussion. It's like a free-for-all. You guys come in there, ask Dodge whatever questions you want, and patreon.com/breaktherules. Also, subscribe to my Substack, which is levslens.com. I write about all kinds of interesting stuff, culture, politics, all kinds of very interesting things. So subscribe to that. And finally, you guys, what do you have cooking in your kitchen? Let's start with Jack, the Perfume Nationalist.
I am at patreon.com/Perfume Nationalist. I'm churning out episodes every week. There's tons of free ones on Apple Podcasts for you to hear what it's all about. But yeah, I don't know. I'm doing book clubs now. I'm doing bi-monthly book clubs. I just did one on Larry McMurtry's Terms of Endearment. And next I'm doing Tom Wolfe's Bonfire of the Vanities. And the last one was really fun.
Nice. And the Chad Haag, what do you got coming up, brother, and where can we find you?
So I can be found on YouTube. Channel is Chad A. Haag Philosophy Channel. Also Patreon. We have the School of Forbidden Texts, in which the latest request from patron for a big series I've been preparing for is on mecha anime from an anti-technological perspective. But the surprising thing I found, the more I've studied mecha as something distinctly Japanese rather than American, is that it's not something actually which you can just dismiss as the illusion of modern technology being under human control. This is how I viewed mecha, admittedly a few years back under the influence of Kaczynski and Lowell. Well, maybe from a Western perspective, but because of its context in especially Japanese Shinto thought, there's actually a lot more to anime than that. And because it cannot just be dismissed as the negative sort of technology, and yet it's also something which you can bring into dialogue with things like deep ecology. It's a really exciting series. I'm having a lot of fun preparing for it, and I really am looking forward to the discussion about this that'll follow.
I almost imagine, by the way, that the mechas are like pregnant with the inner child of the pilots inside, and how there's like a layering approach to this. Another way of thinking about it is like we were talking with Hinduism, the idea of there being like the self, the Atman inside of you, and that is like the collective unconscious of like all of your past lives, but even that is connected to the collective unconscious of everything. And so in a way, that pilot is like the Atman of this outer layer that has to participate in these bloody wars that are going on with these giant husks, these giant machines. And that's just like another external layer of this skin, this animal-like skin of this fighting. But then inside is like more sophisticated, and inside of that it's more sophisticated, like a Matryoshka doll of various layers of the realms, like the physical realm, the astral realm. Anyway, that's my take on it. I don't know if it's close to what you're getting there, Chad, but I can't wait to watch. That should be very interesting. Yeah, so another, in a way, book club. Now, Nina.
Wait. So you have like the big robot, and inside the
Yeah.
big robot is the person, and then inside the person is the homunculus, right? And then inside the homunculus.
Well,
and if I may say
sure.
for the Japanese, the robot also has a kami, because the kami, or the spirits, are not just within humans. That's the Christian view, and not even just within animals or plants. The kami are in everything, including sites like mountains or natural
rivers.
forces like the wind. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like in Spirited Away, there was that river spirit, and it wanted a bath and all that. Yeah, so yeah, I'm very interested in the Shintoism. But Nina, you have a card collection, and you're doing a new edition right now, and you have a thing on your website where people can submit who they want to see in the newer cards. But tell us about this card collection first, for those who don't know.
The Gender Wars playing cards. I wish I had an open deck with me, but I'd have to go into another room to get it. I can go in another room and you
go
talk
into another room.
Yourselves.
I want people to see this deck.
All right, talk among yourselves.
Okay, while Nina is going to get her deck, because trust me, it is well worth it, I just want to say a couple of more things. Number one, if you guys have not subscribed, I don't know what you're doing right now, subscribe to BreakTheRules.tv, subscribe to the YouTube, and subscribe to Jack and Chad Haag. These are two very interesting people who I would definitely love to have on more. And I don't know, like, here we go. Nina's back with the cards. So,
all right, these are the Gender Wars playing cards. These are the backs, and let's see. I'll just pulling them out at random. Here we have Chase Strangio of the ACLU setting fire to a book. Leah Thomas. That's Riley Gaines standing behind him. Here's Kelly J. Keene getting tomato juice dumped on her. This is a Canadian heroine, Amy Eileen Ham. And there's a page where you can look all of them up. Oh, we have Dave Chappelle, brave gender warrior, Jazz Jennings. Poor Jazz Jennings. Very sad. Anyway, there's just a whole, there's 54 cards here, and every single one has a different gender. Oh, wow. My Helen Joyce card is signed. Look at that. I saw Helen Joyce. I attended a conference and she was at it, and she signed my Helen Joyce card.
Nice.
Yeah. So I have these, and
there we go.
You can get them at store.ninapaley.com. That's store.ninapaley.com, along with lots of other merch, because I finally made my own store, which will not be canceled unless they go full anti-Kiwi farms on me and start making upstream providers cancel me. But as a platform, hopefully it won't be canceled. But they can get me booted off my host or get other services. And I'm still doing the Heterodorks podcast with Corinna Cohn. And we had a couple episodes ago, we interviewed Josh Moon of Kiwi Farms. And it's a
Whoa.
very important episode where he really lays out how the internet got broken, really, on his behalf. I mean, he didn't want it to be, but all these people, he bothered people enough so that they are actually willing to break the internet. So
Wow.
it's
Yeah.
a good listen.
I mean, speaking of Kiwi Farms, Nina, you know who I put in that request for the
Yes,
card.
Chris Chan. I think I will have to make a Chris Chan card. in the
Yes.
next deck.
Yes.
I think it's got to happen.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
yeah.
there's so many varieties. There's like classic Chris Chan, then there's like Christine Chandler, then there's Sonichu, you know, like the chaotic combo. I mean, there's so
I will
much.
consult with you, okay? When it's time to do this card, you can advise me.
You
what
should do like an entire
uh,
Chris Chan theme.
Deck, a whole deck. He could be an
exactly.
entire suit. There could be
Exactly.
the Chan suit. And
Yeah, and then his
who knows what
mother,
else.
like the Snorlax, and the dad with the axe, you know, to chop down the internet. I mean, he really is like the most documented, or she or whatever. The most the most document. Well, not just lolcow, the most documented individual in history. Bar none.
In your world, in your
No, in general. I don't.
twisted
Am I
little
lying
bubble.
about this, Jack? Like there is nobody else who has been, you know, just like objectively. Objectively, there's nobody who has been as documented as Chris Chan, bar none. I'm telling you. This is the state of the world. For some reason, we are very much attracted. I mean, I'm only speaking for myself here, to this strange individual. And I don't know exactly why. Maybe because I played Sonic. Look at that. Glass Kick wrote J for Jule. Oh, lordy, the memories, they keep flowing back. Anyway, guys, this is what tells me that we gotta go. This is the end of the stream. It's over. Thank you guys so much.